we are going to move on to our next presentation, which is Oley Foundation and ASPEN, Partners in Advocacy, with Penny Allen, National Director, Nutrition Support, Optum Infusion Pharmacy, and Bettemarie Bond, an Oley Ambassador.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm honored to present this topic with Bettemarie Bond, and we'll let Betty take off and go first. But what we're going to talk about today is just how can each of us advocate? And, you know, if it sounds scary, like I can't do that, you know, we'll give Bettemarie's perspective as a consumer and a patient, and then my perspective as a clinician. And I think hopefully after you listen, you'll hear that everything that you say, everything that you could possibly share out there, and Swampna, you know, covered that this morning, is critical to having positive change in the home infusion, home enteral, home PN setting. So Bettemarie, if you want to take it and run.
Hi, everybody. Is the screen sharing working?
It is.
Oh, wonderful. Penny and I are honored to speak to you today about a topic near and dear to our hearts, advocacy. We hope to inspire you to advocate. Many years ago, using my voice was hard for me when I was in the hospital. I did not speak up for myself to nurses or to doctors when I should have, because I was more concerned about hurting their feelings. For example, after the third failed IV attempt, I should have asked for someone else to try, but instead I stayed quiet and endured over 8 unsuccessful attempts by that same person. And that's happened many, many times. But eventually, I kept suffering because of that, but eventually I learned that I needed to speak up to advocate for what was best for me while in the hospital. Now, I use my voice in another way to do presentations for medical professionals. And here is a photo. Melissa and I had the opportunity at the Hospital of the University of Penn to speak to the floor nurses. And it was a wonderful meeting, and we learned a lot about each other. We've learned perspectives of the nurses, and then they learned our perspective of living life on home pen. A long time ago, doctors told me there was nothing more they could do for me. And hopefully in 20 years, there would be a medication out allowing me to eat and not to have GI pain. But after 20 years on home pen, and still no FDA medication for my condition, I decided to use my voice on Capitol Hill in hopes of encouraging funding for research, improved healthcare coverage, and to educate legislatures about home infusion therapy. And that center photo is a photo from my very first time with DDNC, the Digestive Disease National Coalition. And that's how I got started with ASPEN as an Oley ambassador. You may be wondering, well, why should I advocate? Well, as the Lorax from Dr. Seuss says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Advocating for what you believe in is crucial. If you don't ask for it, people assume you don't need it. This is true not only with medical professionals, but also with politicians. They have no idea of what we are experiencing, what our needs are, or what needs to be done to improve things. Therefore, it is vital that we take time to share our experiences, because unless we do, they have no idea at all what we need, and they focus on other issues instead. As you know, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Advocacy can be performed in a variety of ways: person to person, over the phone, and social media has just exploded and is a great resource, utilizing Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Through Oley, there's many opportunities to advocate. Through meetings like this, maybe you have an experience that would be great for the Lifeline letter, possibly leading a breakout session at an Oley conference. It's important to keep your Oley profile up to date. This way, if Oley is presented with an opportunity, they can look through to see who would be a nice fit for that. And to give some examples of some opportunities, sometimes different organizations will approach Oley and say, oh, we're holding a medical conference or a continuing ed seminar, and we'd like to have a patient talk about their experiences. Well, this way Oley can look then to see if somebody would fit for that. Also, talking with the FDA. And a great example of that is next Friday on May 7th, Oley is hosting a summit on enteral connectors. Oley consumers on enteral nutrition will be present, but also so will the FDA, manufacturers, and clinicians. Companies that manufacture medical products also like to invite patients to come to speak. And then, such as this, engaging with organizations such as ASPEN that set standards of care. Advocacy includes educating politicians about the issues we face daily. You know your experiences, and your story matters. Your voice can encourage support for or against legislation. To begin, you don't even need to know any specifics about a bill or the process. You already know your story, so start there. Some things that you can share: begin by talking about your diagnosis, daily challenges that you face, how a proposed cut to Medicare, Medicaid, or to insurance would affect your daily life. Many Oley members are currently affected by a shortage of multivitamins or other supplies. Maybe there's no FDA-approved medication available for your treatment. The FDA holds a lot of patient-focused development meetings, and as an Oley representative, I've attended a few of those. They're a great opportunity as well. There was one held for GI conditions where they were planning out the next 10 years on research opportunities to try to come up with new medications. Many Oley members have had issues, and they've been told that their home infusion company is no longer able to ship their parental nutrition to their travel destination due to a pharmacy law change. That would be a great topic to talk about. Other Oley members have been experiencing issues with ethanol locks. And then many of us have issues with insurances. For example, legislation that was introduced last session, and Oley has been part of a coalition trying to get the bill reintroduced this year, is the Medical Nutrition Equity Act. And that would help improve getting tube feeding formula or supplies covered for some of our members. Work continues to help get hydration or IV antibiotics covered under Medicare. Something else is the Step Therapy Act that's currently in the Senate right now, and hopefully it'll be reintroduced into the House. Step therapy is where your doctor may recommend a medication and your insurance says, oh, you need to try A, B, and C and fail on them first before you can take the actual one. And this bill may be able to help some Oley members. So that was just a list of some ideas. There's many possibilities that you can discuss. Just talk about yourself and you'll do great. Most people think that legislative advocacy must be done in DC, but that's not true. It can be done while resting on your sofa in the very comfort of your own home. And this photo is proof. Recently, through the Digestive Disease National Coalition, my mom and I participated in a congressional meeting, and we spoke with Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, all while sitting on my sofa. That's been a little bit of a plus due to the pandemic, and a lot of the meetings now are held by Zoom, Skype, and other platforms, and hopefully they'll continue that into the future as well. So now you may be wondering, okay, I have some ideas of what I'd like to talk about. How can I connect with the legislatures? Well, you can pick up a phone and call the office directly, or you can go on through their website and set up an appointment. I've done all of those, and they work out well, but sometimes the first time can be a little bit intimidating. And what you can do then is participate in an organization's lobby day. For example, as I mentioned already, the Digestive Disease National Coalition. I've also participated in other ones based upon my other diagnoses with the MDA, the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, and then the Rare Disease Legislative Advocate. They basically set up the appointments and then they help educate you about the legislative priorities that are important at that moment. And what you do then is you just talk a little bit about what you planned on talking about, but then you kind of bring it back and relate it to one of their key priorities that's important to that organization. Be creative and utilize social media. A lot of politicians have Facebook pages and Twitter accounts now. And also if you're putting posts online, you can tag them. Hopefully, as things start to open back up, you can visit a politician at their local office. That's really nice because then you don't have to go to DC. Here's a photo of Congressman Mike Fitzpatrick at his local office. Once you start advocating, you will be amazed at how easy it is to advocate for change and to lobby for legislation relevant to our Oley family. Speaking with legislative offices is important because they count the number of people that contact them about an issue to decide if they should support or oppose a bill. Therefore, it is vital that hometown families reach out to offices. We are fighters and we've overcome so much with our medical conditions. We are so good at defying the odds. Now we need to defy the odds in a different arena on Capitol Hill. And now I turn it over to Penny.
Thank you, Bettemarie. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet, Penny.
Okay, something is going on here. My apologies. We may have to have Bettemarie just advance my slides for me, if that's easier.
Okay, I can put it on again.
Want to do that? Yeah, sorry. It could be my work laptop is so firewalled at times it tends to act up.
Can you see it?
Go. Yes, I can now. Thank you so much. My apologies. So thank you, Bettemarie. I think that the takeaway message is that if you think that your voice doesn't matter, it really does, regardless if you are a family member, a consumer, a clinician, anyone working in healthcare. You know, as Bettemarie said, it can be intimidating with your first experiences with advocacy or getting involved with anything regarding healthcare and politics. My background is I'm a registered dietitian. I've worked in the home care field for over 30 years now, basically functioning as a nutrition support dietitian working in the home infusion industry. About 6 years ago, I joined the ASPEN Public Policy Committee because as a clinician, I was very frustrated about reimbursement issues and insurance coverages, particularly Medicare. As you know, probably many of you on the call know, the Medicare qualification process for parenteral and enteral nutrition, you know, has been very difficult over the last couple of decades. So I thought, well, you know what, I'll join this committee. And I totally felt like a fish out of water at first, not knowing where to start, what to do, how to begin to get involved. So, but over a short period of time, you know, I think as Bettemarie said, one of the most important things is we all know what our stories are. And that's really the most important thing, is just tell your story. I remember one of the very first Oley conferences I attended, there was a lobbyist who spoke, and he said, as a consumer, a patient, a caregiver, they're going to listen more to what you say than what they're going to listen to, you know, any doctor or dietitian or pharmacist or company that manufactures products. They're going to listen to you more as the consumer. So what we try to do is we all work together. And I learned from sitting back and watching consumers and patients tell their story. So over the last 6 years, now I'm the chair of public policy for ASPEN. And one of our biggest challenges to work on has been the Medicare PN policies. So how, I've advanced. One thing that really got me over my fear of meeting with legislative representatives and so forth was participating with the Digestive Disease National Coalition that Bettemarie mentioned. That was the first time going to Capitol Hill and really taking a step back and listening to others, whether they were clinicians, consumers, tell their stories. I've had the key opportunity to meet with the Food and Drug Administration as well. Joan and Roz and other members of the Oley Foundation have been involved with many meetings over the years with the FDA, with other organizations. And I think as time goes on, you get more comfortable. We're all pretty much small organizations, if you think about it, Oley being, grassroots, and the American Society for Parental and Enteral Nutrition is still relatively a small organization as well. So what we've tried to do is join forces together, work with any other groups out there, some of the groups that Bettemarie mentioned, but even including the National Home Infusion Association, so that the more of us that join together with initiatives that are beneficial for all of us, that we found that really makes sense, and that really helps us to get our mission and our voice across. Next slide. So the mission of ASPEN, for those of you that haven't heard of ASPEN, it's just an acronym for that American Society of Parental and Enteral Nutrition. Really, we're working to seek an environment where every patient or consumer receives safe, efficacious, and high quality care. It's meaning, are you on the right nutrition support? Is it working right for you? Is it individualized for you? And do you have access to high quality care, whether it's your primary care physician, your specialist, the hospital that you go to, et cetera, et cetera. And our role within ASPEN, and ASPEN is really a multidisciplinary organization made up of physicians, nurses, dietitians, pharmacists, and all of us work to advance the science and practice of clinical nutrition and metabolism. Next slide. So our advocacy goals, I'm not going to read this all because it's a lot of text on the slide, but if you look at what our mission is and what we're advocating for, it's all about quality of care and safety, so that when you receive your tube feeding supplies, your parental nutrition supplies, some of the things that even Vanessa talked about, is it warm when you get it? I mean, our
Optum Infusion, this is Sherry.
Somebody's not muted. Sherry, I believe. Our goal is to make sure
muted.
I just muted her. Okay, our mission is really to make sure that we are here to make sure the quality and the safety is there for everyone. Our mission is also to make sure that, if anyone needs medical foods, formulas, supplements, tube feeding, parental nutrition, that ideally there's fair reimbursement to cover that, so that all of us have access to the care that we need. A fair marketplace that doesn't jeopardize. So when we talk about drug shortages, I mean, that has been a huge issue, I think, since the beginning of time, since I started in home infusion, beginning with multivitamin shortages. And here we are dealing with the same things today in 2021. So advocating for, fair pricing of ingredients within PN, all of these types of things. We're interacting with the NIH, the national research agencies, the regulatory agencies, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and so forth. So this is historically the types of goals that ASPEN would be involved with. Next slide, Bettemarie. So as I said in the beginning, this is one of the biggest issues that has plagued the home infusion and the home parental and enteral nutrition space, is really the coverage criteria or the laws that govern this. For decades, anyone who's been involved with home PN or home EN knows that not everyone has coverage. When you turn 65 and your insurance might switch to Medicare, or if you filed for disability and you're now eligible for benefits, people can be 30 years old, 25 years old, and have Medicare as their primary payer. But the coverage criteria for this has been very limited for years and years. A long story and too long to go into the detail, but part of the major reason is that It hasn't been updated since 1984. Think about that. That's even when Swampna was speaking earlier today. She was born in 1989. This was prior to her even, coming onto this earth. So a very, very long time ago is when the original rules that set the criteria for the federal government to cover home PN and home EN was established back in 1984. And nothing's really been updated since. So the mentality with Medicare for parental and enteral nutrition is that pump or tube, depending on the therapy that you're on, serves as a prosthetic device. So that's where they put it under the Medicare guidelines or under the the durable medical equipment benefits, is under a prosthetic device benefit. And their mentality really is that TPN or that enteral is going to take the place of an organ or a function of an organ that isn't working anymore, whether it be your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine. And I go into that detail just so you can see historically, this is one of the biggest problems in terms of people not having access to care. Next slide. So what have we done about it? I mean, anyone that has had to deal with this knows that the policies, first and foremost, haven't been updated in greater than 35 years up until last November. And we'll get into that. Part of the problem has been that what the government required for testing, for diagnoses, it was a very limited group of diagnoses where these therapies were covered, and indications for therapy, hadn't changed at all. But we know that thankfully, we've made progress in the nutrition support world, and we don't do things the same way we necessarily did them back in the 80s. Not everybody needs permanent nutrition support, and that's one of the biggest barriers to access, is that sometimes you might need PN or EN for less than 90 days. It's not always a permanent condition, but under the governmental policies, even today, that's part of the caveat. So, the options for patients remained not very great if you don't meet the Medicare or even state Medicaid conditions at times, that your choice was to remain in the hospital or get referred to a skilled nursing facility, both of which being a higher cost of care to receive your parental and enteral nutrition, or self-pay, which is cost prohibitive for many people. Next slide. So what have we done about that? And I guess this is the big long story leading up to this, that everybody has complained about this for years and years. When I first joined ASPEN Public Policy, every single meeting would get derailed with all of us basically complaining, like, what can we do? What can we do? ASPEN has made efforts over the years, and I'll go through it, but in brief, basically, from the beginning of time, ASPEN has lobbied and, gone to the federal government and said, not everybody needs to be on PN or EN permanently. Can we change this? Here's some clinical information to prove that. Back in 2008, they revisited it again and said, can we look at some of the diagnoses? Can we look at things like the fecal fat tests that, are proof of a patient having malabsorption? No one really does that kind of study in the hospital anymore. So because of the lobbying over the years, finally, we had a meeting last summer, July of 2020, and that is what led to, on October 8th, the DME Medical Advisory Committees released a joint statement and said that they were going to retire the classic outdated parental and enteral nutrition policies. And here's their quote: due to the evolution of parental nutrition clinical paradigms. Next slide. So this is just the history that I described in brief. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but this is how long it took. It literally took decades of major organizations working together. Oley, together with ASPEN, together with the National Home Infusion Association, and really some of the changes that recently happened with the federal government, where they changed the process of when we would go to them and say, can you please reconsider changing this policy? We don't use these outdated studies anymore. We don't do this kind of testing anymore. It's almost non-existent. So in July of 2020, after finally meeting with them and presenting some clear-cut literature, getting a group of people together for the first time, they finally listened. And when we asked for the reconsideration, that was when they made the decision to just retire the policies and throw them out. So where we're at today, and it's been a long road, is we're still in the midst of discussing the policies with the federal government. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago, they asked for live comment and written comment from anybody, consumers, companies, physicians, prescribers, to say, all right, we heard you in July. We're listening to a lot of the things that you said. So we've come up with new proposed policies. What do you think about these? And that's really, honestly, the first time in 20 to 30 years where we're at this place. So we view it as, it's not perfect today, but we've made some progress. And since November, when those old policies were thrown out, we've seen some flexibility in, not everybody has coverage still, because we've got some fighting to do, to get it out of the prosthetic device benefit. But the lobbying with everybody, pulling together has made it so that it used to be 1 out of 10 patients for parental nutrition, as an example, met the old criteria. And now we're seeing as many as 6 or 7 referrals out of 10 meeting the criteria. So we're moving the process along. So access to therapy has been greatly improved since November for Medicare beneficiaries. Next slide. And this really is just a summary, not to focus all on Medicare, but that's been a big focus for all of us together. But there's a lot of legislation that we, ASPEN and Oley is working together, and the NHIA, the National Home Infusion Association, is working together. So it takes a village is the message. It takes clinicians, physicians, all of us to speak up, to go to meetings like the Digestive Disease National Coalition, if possible. And I will tell you, Bettemarie mentioned it, I loved it that we we did this by Zoom this year. I felt like some of the offices that we had Zoom meetings with, they paid more attention. And I did hear that some of them didn't, but for the most part, I felt like we had a more open and receptive audience. And some of the other bills and legislation that we all get involved with are things like the Malnutrition Awareness Week, which happens every September. And this is really important because when we talk about the United States today, the hospital, the outpatient setting, it seems crazy that we should still be talking about malnutrition, but I think it's an even bigger problem today than when it first came to light in the 1960s, when those first papers on malnutrition in hospitalized patients came to light. So it seems nuts that it's 60 years later that we still have to fight to talk about malnutrition and make people aware that this is a significant issue, not just, in the community setting, but in the hospital setting and the outpatient setting as well. So we've been successful in having those bills passed to bring attention to the light of this problem in the United States. The Medical Nutrition Therapy Act, in brief, is one act that basically is saying for Medicare and Medicaid patients that you should have access to nutrition counseling. Right now, the only coverage for this is going to be if you have diabetes or end-stage renal failure. So we're hoping with the new 117th Congress that a lot of these bills, what happens unfortunately is you get a new president, new Congress, new representatives, you've got to reintroduce the bills all over again. So you're starting over consistently. And that was eye-opening for me, that you can have a bill like, I believe it was the colon cancer screening bill. The first time I went to DDNC, they said, oh, we've been fighting to get this bill passed for 10 years and it still wasn't passed. And I was like, geez, that just doesn't make sense. But every time you have a new Congress, the bill needs to be introduced. It gets a new number. You've got to get people to vote on it. There needs to be majorities. There's rules and regulations. So eye-opening. So we're waiting for bills like the Medical Nutrition Therapy Act to get reintroduced so that people that have other medical conditions besides diabetes and end-stage renal failure can have paid therapy, diet counseling. If you have cancer, wouldn't you think that you should have coverage to see a dietitian, to have diet counseling if you were going through a really bad round of chemotherapy or radiation therapy? Another bill we're all working together for is the patient access to medical foods, the Medical Nutrition Equity Act that says there should be coverage if a patient with a rare disease, and this ties into some of the rare disease conversations as well, that you need a specialized formula or supplement there should be insurance coverage. There should be mandates that your insurance company needs to pay for that. Bettemarie mentioned the Safe Step Act. That's one of the things that is, aligned with the Medicare. One of the things we all spoke up about was with the new enteral policy, the government is proposing that you have to try a basic, regular, intact protein formula, and there's nothing wrong with those formulas. They're great. Most people tolerate them well, but if you had a malabsorptive condition or something, you might need another specialty formula. That's an example of how Safe Step Act works is, when it's mandated, no, you've got to try this drug or this formula first before you can move up the next step and get what you need. But for many patients and consumers, this can be harmful. This could set you back on your therapy. So that is one bill that, has already been reintroduced into the 117th Congress. So we're all supporting that legislation. So, and then some other things that ASPEN is involved with, National Institutes of Nutrition, medical education. I mean, being a dietitian, we've always heard like physicians, if they're lucky, get one course in nutrition in medical school. Hopefully that's changed somewhat, but I think for pharmacists, for other disciplines, it's the same thing. Unless you choose to learn more about nutrition, your overall education is really lacking. So the onus is on a lot of medical healthcare professionals to decide that they want to study this more, decide that they, have chosen to focus on nutrition. And there should be more funding and education for that. So next slide. I think overall, really pretty much it's just the new laws. This is the biggest thing going on right now with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid is things are coming. We've made some progress with all of these bills. It takes a village. It takes all of us speaking up, not being afraid to speak up. And we're hopeful. We're hoping that access to care, whether it's simple counseling for your diet and what to eat and not eat, or all the way to full-blown coverage if you need it for IV nutrition support like parental nutrition or tube feeding enteral nutrition. Next slide. So the work continues together. We have a long way to go, as Bettemarie said. We need to get parental and enteral nutrition out of that prosthetic device benefit. That's not the situation for everybody, and this would open up access to care. Coverage for hydration, antibiotics. So we've got some more work to do. We're making progress. Sometimes it feels like we're that Greek mythology, Sisyphus pushing the big boulder up the hill and rolling back down. But we can move to the next slide. I will say that take a look at the Oley website, oley.org. If you're a clinician, take a look at nutritioncare.org. That's the ASPEN website. Click on the legislative or advocacy tabs. There's a lot of great information there that will show you how to. For example, on the ASPEN website, if you just like, oh my God, I'm a dietitian, I'm a nurse, I'm a pharmacist, I've never done this before. We even rolled out new tutorials this year. So there's videos that can help you to say like, all right, I need a primer on advocacy. On the Oley website, it will give you, some of the information Bettemarie spoke to, like, oh, there's a meeting next week. You know what, maybe I'm kind of scared to speak up, but maybe I'll just sit back and listen this time. And then maybe next time I'll feel more comfortable, or I might just jump in and give my 2 cents if I'm comfortable with that. But together, that's really how we're going to continue to improve access to care and the quality of care for all of us as we move forward. Next slide. We're just about done, and then we'll take some questions. So this is thank you to Bettemarie for all these inspirational slides, but this is how things in life work, right? If we don't all band together, we can change the world. We speak up, and it doesn't matter if you think my voice really doesn't matter. I think once you've listened to Bettemarie, Swapna, all of you that are out there that speak up and tell your truth, that's really what's going to help all of us fight and lobby for better access to care all the way around. So that's all we have. I think if we have a few minutes for questions, we can take a look at the chat and go from there.
We do. Penny and Bettemarie, thank you for such a great overview of the advocacy efforts that are going on. I just want to make one comment because Swapna had to jump off the meeting. She's going to be on later on, but I wanted to make sure everyone saw that she works for the Rare Disease Legislative or legislative advocates, sorry. She has the registration link for the Rare Disease Week to meet with your federal legislators in July. So in case anyone wants to go into the chat and they're not looking at it, there is the link in the chat to get to that. I believe Joan wanted to jump into the meeting at this time.
Yeah, Penny and Bettemarie, thank you so much for showcasing the need for advocacy. And I'd like to echo what I believe Penny said was the importance of the patient's voice. And I can speak as someone who has been to the FDA, has sat in on legislative meetings with the DDNC, and I can tell you, I go prepared with the voice of the community. I think I've got a lot of great information, feedback from Oley members, and I go down the list and they're like, oh, okay, good. But when a consumer begins to talk about how they live, how this therapy sustains them, they're willing to show their catheter, or even some have gone in being willing to tube feed, open up a can, pour it in, and begin the feeding process. All of the questions, all of the attention goes directly to that consumer. That's what brings the message forward. I have to admit someone, excuse me. Okay.
Yep, I got what that.
And another thing, I was meeting with the FDA. We had home care company representatives there. Again, I go with an armful of comments from our membership. And it was just our contributions were acknowledged. However, when the voice spoke, when the consumer spoke directly, and talked about how what they were proposing to do was going to impact their life, that got the attention. And that's where the questions were again addressed, and a response was, you've been heard.
I think it brings it home. It makes it real to them. Whereas if we're just talking about it, think about it. Some of these people have no idea what tube feeding is. They don't know what TPN is. They unless someone in their family or, they have no idea what we're talking about, but then to see it, right. Same thing, Joan. I remember a consumer talking about step therapy and how it impacted her because her insurance company made her switch her biologic for Crohn's disease. And she wasn't on PN or EN or whatever, but I remember her story because it set her back over a year. So the impact of your life, it is your voice, and they all switch and listen to the person who it's affecting. It's amazing, the impact.
It really, really is. And echoing on start small, a good place to start would be right in your own area, because you're a voting constituent. And when your lawmakers have their town hall meetings, which I think they're required to hold, show up and just privately introduce yourself and describe how you sustain yourself. And it's going to meet with it's the wow factor, for lack of a better way to describe it. But perhaps he will remember you when he's voting on legislation that could impact you, or perhaps reimbursement. And I think it's a great place to start, because they're real people.
Someone in the chat asked the question too, they posed it, they said, if you need signatures for bills or whatever, they'd be, all for it, which is wonderful and awesome. What we can try to do more, I know within ASPEN, we tend to send out blast messages that say, hey, this piece of legislation is coming up. Here's the link, here's the phone number. National Home Infusion is really good about doing this as well. This impacts all of us. Here's even a sample letter if you want to take it and make it your own. so maybe we can collaborate a little bit more on that as well to make it easy. I think sometimes that's part of the scary part, like, oh, I don't want to call my senator's office. Like, what do I do? Or the first time I did that, I'm like, click, click. All right, they did the letter for me. I can change it around a little bit. So any tools like that we can help, so that it doesn't seem as scary or overwhelming. We can get that on the website.
And this is a great time to really have everyone in the Oley community update your profiles in our database so we can best serve you and advocate for you. And I think,
as Joan and Penny mentioned, you're building a relationship as well with the offices. I find that going to some of the local events, the politician, for example, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, you really get to know them. And so it was just so wonderful that he really made a point to join the meeting when I contacted and asked him to join in the meeting. And it's not just a one-time thing. You could always contact them and give them updates. Oh, it's Home Pen Awareness Week, or oh, it's Tube Feeding Awareness Week. And as they also mentioned, they really don't have any idea of what these therapies are. And it really does make a difference to go in and to show them exactly what it is. You see their eyes just open up. And the more you talk about it, a lot of it's increasing their understanding for just what we experience and go through. So that way, when bills and stuff come up, we're in the back of their mind. And as Penny also said, it takes years and years. It's sometimes a lot of little bills or a lot of little momentum to help make a change over time. And so your voice is just very much needed to help push things a little bit further along to help us all.
And I'll push it for the clinicians on the call too, because I know there's some of you out there that this is your chance to get involved, go to the ASPEN website, go to the Oley website, click on the resources that are there so that you understand it a little bit better. And when you see things come out saying, hey, click on this, call your offices, that's really, people have been complaining about the Medicare criteria for the 30 plus years that I've been in home infusion. And finally, after just being a dog on a bone, it's not perfect, but we made a little bit of progress that I honestly never thought would happen. So, and it's the same, the relationship with Joan can attest with the FDA, even with the CMS, medical directors, you meet with them once or twice, and for some reason, that winds of change happened and they listened for once. So who knows? We'll take it. But it takes a long time.